We ended up purchasing 91,000 acres, and then we sold 73,000 acres to the state of Florida. And so we ended up with 18,000 acres. And out of the 18,000 acres, we're preserving half of that. So at the end of the day, 90% of the original ranch is in preservation forever. So when people ask me, gee, what's the thing you're most proud of when it comes to Babcock Ranch? It's the fact that we've got some 81,000 acres in preservation, never to be built on, that our kids, our grandkids can all enjoy and know it's going to be there and never developed.
See what we got going on here this morning. Our Florida cracker cattle will be off onto your right-hand side. No longer used for beef or dairy production, the Florida cracker cow is a historical preservation breed, but at one time a very important food source for the early Spaniards residing here in Florida. Come on over, Daisy. Say good morning. We're gonna make you famous. Now, Daisy's in here because she had a hard time having babies, and Thanksgiving morning, we came in and she had given birth to Duffy. That's her first live birth. Now the Piggly Wiggly we see, that is a Florida wild hog. Over 400,000 wild pigs in nature, producing almost $1 billion in property damage here in Florida alone. Now the state of Florida still classifies the wild hog as an invasive pest. One sow in 1 year could give us 45 babies. Now here's the kicker. Those little baby pigs, they start having baby pigs at 7 months old. They're not even a whole year old yet, and they're already spitting out up to 45 babies a year. These little fellers here are about 6 months old now. They're pretty close. All right, we're gonna take a little hop up the road. We got more to talk about.
Part of it, the reason why it's so hard to start a new town, because it's so complicated. It's very risky. A lot of times when you build communities within existing communities, all the infrastructure is there. Here we had to create everything from the ground up. It's a daunting task, but what's really great about it is you can do it right from the beginning.
When we started developing it, one of the things Mr. Kitson did was to see if we could really figure out the hydrology of the place. Because in Florida, if you don't get the water right, you'll never restore the land, nor you'll be able to manage it effectively. And remember, we're dealing with 48 square miles here. That's bigger than Washington, D.C. We found ways that we could raise the water table again and still know that we wouldn't flood the future development.
We have a utility, a wastewater and water utility, that we built, that we had to get permitted and built, that we own right now, that also has reuse water throughout the community. That alone was an incredibly complex process. We literally spent 8 years working through every one of these permits, whether it be for road impacts, water quality, all the environmental permits, and then literally the plan itself. What is Babcock Ranch going to look like? What does the road system look like? When I say massively complex, you don't have enough time in this program to talk through all of the permits and approvals and entitlements that we had to get.
I suggested that we do a comprehensive wildlife study. That's part of my background. We did that over about a 6-year period. So we knew where the panthers were going, and there's only one here at the time, and where the deer were moving, and where the small game was moving, and where the corridors for migratory birds were. So that's helped us figure out where the best places to put wildlife crossings as we build roads and all those kind of things, and where the best places are to put preserves. You have to make these horizontal connections when you have a landscape like this that's so large. So where does it make sense to connect the most green spaces to get people and animals east to west or west to east? And so if you look at it, you'll see a green grid, and the villages are tucked in that grid. So homeowners will have backups onto those greenways, and it gives a buffer for wildlife to be able to move around. And see how it works? You got your snail, and the snail's curled up around in here. And then this is the door. So this is what we call an operculum. It's the door that seals it in. So if the water goes down, it just closes that door and seals itself until the water comes back up again. This whole wetland system had been over-dried during the dry season and over-wet in the wet season. This is kind of a dam, but we call them weirs because they're low-level dams. So by putting these water control structures in, we can balance that out. We can hold it at the maximum during the water rising in the spring, and then we can rehydrate the groundwater all summer long and keep it flowing so that recharge in the groundwater comes up, but not so much it's going to flood any of the habitats that aren't historically flooded, nor the residents. A piece of land at this scale is hard for people to comprehend, that there's still this much wildness, and there will be surrounding it even when there's 45,000 people living here. And hopefully we can keep that balance.
Building green and being more sustainable doesn't increase the cost of construction. If you start with design, you won't necessarily increase the cost. Within Babcock Ranch, we require a minimum green certification, and we chose that because it's climate specific, and we are in a hot, humid climate. The most important thing that we look at from an energy standpoint definitely is going to be the building envelope. We have to look at the roof, we have to look at the insulation, we have to look at the windows, we have to look at the air conditioning. So one of the important things about the building envelope is actually the windows. And here in Florida, because we have so much heat coming in, the U factor actually tells us the insulating qualities of the windows. And the lower this number, the more insulating they are. If you look at the R value on the insulation, you actually don't see incredibly high numbers. This is like a paper bag with tinfoil on it. So it's about reflecting the heat out much more than providing a cavity, whereas up in our roof area, you can see much more robust insulation because again, we have a lot of heat coming in from the ceiling. It's very simple stuff. It's not rocket science. This is really just making informed decisions, making incremental steps to improved and more resource efficient decisions. Then we look at water, we look at healthy indoor materials, we look at different things in the site with respect to natural vegetation. So it's really a holistic approach to the entire house to make it a green or more sustainable house. When we look at things like greenhouse gases, or we look at how energy is used, for example, in the state of Florida, we have three really big pieces to the pie. A third of the piece of that pie is buildings, and a third of it's transportation, and then another third of it has to do with industry. But actually in Florida, our industry is healthcare and hospitality, which actually are giant buildings, hotels and hospitals. So it's not really a third, it's more mostly buildings with some transportation. And so to me, it was so critical to look at energy efficiency with respect to buildings in order to think about how do we reduce using energy in the state of Florida. And we reduce in new construction by being more efficient.
What's normally the highlight of every tour? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, allow me to welcome you to Gator Bridge. That heron's got a catfish. Win a fish dinner. Pretty good numbers here this morning. These are all males, by the way. One of the prettiest places I've ever seen in Florida nature. And how about that? No ambient noise. No traffic, no airplanes, no cell phones. Yeah.